Okay, hey guys, in this video we're going to be talking about should you get the Beyerdynamic DT990s or the more expensive DT1990 Pros. So we have the DT990 Pro 250 ohm versus the DT1990 Pro. A lot of times you're just paying for the construction of the headphone, the way the headphone makes you feel, where the company placed it in their different price points. A lot of these companies are like, hey, people are willing to spend more than a couple $100, so let's give them a flagship product. The problem is that doesn't necessarily mean the more expensive headphone is going to sound better. Your emotions may be telling you, hey, this sounds better because it looks better, it's higher quality, it's more expensive, and the DT990s are just these cheap, flimsy pieces of crap. The thing is, when we start to look at this stuff, so we can go to Beyerdynamic. So let's look at the measurements. Okay, so again, the frequency response measurements, the DT1990 have balanced and analytical ear pads. So we're going to look at both of those. And we're going to look at the Dakoni Elite Velour ear pads. So 3 different ear pads on the DT1990 versus fresh pads and worn pads on the DT990. So we're going to download the analytical ear pads for the DT1990, the balanced ear pads for the 1990, and Dakoni Elite Velour ear pads for third party. A lot of people are curious about those. And then we're going to get the DT990 fresh ear pads and worn ear pads. Okay, so we're going to start plugging this in to our thing here. So we have diffuse field target. We're going to let's just start uploading some of these. So we're going to get the Beyerdynamic DT1990. Let's do the 990s first. Okay, DT990s fresh pads. DT990s worn pads, which are right here. So these are the Beyerdynamic DT990 fresh and worn pads. Let's flatten the frequency response graph of diffuse field. Let's also add something and take it away so that we got the labeling on the screen. Okay, so when we look at this, we can see out of the box the Beyerdynamic DT990s in green, right here, have these huge treble spikes in green. Okay, so in green, it can be fatiguing, it can be shrill. A lot of people may really hate that there's, a lot of and a lot of, I personally think the 6 kilohertz peak is the most fatiguing about the fresh ear pads. Then the other, so this peak, I think it's the worst. And then these 3 other peaks are just kind of like shimmery and shrill. And I admit, it sounds a bit fatiguing. It sounds like, Jesus Christ, this is a bit bright. This is a bit shrill. But the thing is, even with fresh pads in green, it's really good sounding all the way through until you get into the treble. Then it's piercing. But over a few months period of time, when the pads are get worn in, when we trace over this, we can see that 6K peak isn't even there anymore. And the 6K peak is gone. When we trace over this, it is just a lot smoother. There's these 2 shrill air spikes, but honestly, it just adds a little bit of shimmer. It's not that bad. So you put up with the DT990 fresh pads for a bit, and you're left with this. Okay, and then we want to upload the frequency response target. We want to upload the frequency response target, the end game target here. So the end game target, we can get rid of diffuse field. So the end game target, we can see the DT990s follow the end game best sounding. You know, this is how a headphone should sound to sound flawless. So we can see that the DT990s with worn ear pads, besides rolling off the sub bass and being a little bit, you know, shrill in the air frequencies, the high treble air frequencies, it's flawless. You know, we're getting a flawless response just about, okay? So this is what the more expensive headphone is now competing with. So let's go ahead and bring in the DT1990 with analytical pads first. Okay, so DT1990 with analytical pads versus DT990 with worn ear pads. We can see the DT1990, let's change the color again. The DT1990 in orange with analytical pads does not have as much proper bass emphasis. So the DT990s in red have a little bit more punch in the bass and the sub bass. So the DT990s have more powerful bass than the analytical ear pads. Analytical typically means that the bass is not boosted very much, and balanced pads means the bass is boosted, you know. So the bass is not supposed to be boosted on these analytical pads, and it's not. So the balanced pads are going to be a bigger competitor to the DT990s when reaching this bass target, okay? This target right here. So it's currently the DT990s have better bass than the analytical pads on the 1990. Now when we get into the higher frequencies, we can see the orange line has this horrible 4 kilohertz cut, 4.2 kilohertz cut. It's got this huge 8K peak. The DT1990s are known for their huge 8K peak. A lot of headphones are known for a particular problem, and the DT1990s are known for the huge 8K peak, which is very fatiguing and noticeable, as well as this dip right here. So these three spots on the DT1990 are really bad. I really can't stand the 4 kilohertz cut. That bothers me. The human ear is very sensitive to the upper mids, which is the reason why we want to scoop it out a little bit right here. So anything going on wrong right here is very audible and fatiguing. Just about anything up here is very audible and fatiguing. Your ear is most sensitive to this. So having this 4K cut in this region and this 8K peak in this region is like a really bad fatiguing coloring of the sound on the 1990. And when we look at the 990s with worn ear pads, it is a lot smoother and cleaner and transparent sounding on the DT990s with worn ear pads. So these deviations right here really make the DT1990 sound colored and more fatiguing than DT990s with worn ear pads. And then they lack bass emphasis on the 1990s with analyticals. So let's go ahead and get rid of the 1990 with analytical and bring in the 1990 with balanced pads and change the color. Okay. So we're going to look at this now. It's a little bit more of an even playing field on the bass now, because the 1990 and green right here have a bass boost now. So now the DT1990 actually have more sub bass emphasis than the 990s. So the 1990s with balanced ear pads now have more, you know, thump, more rumble, but they're also muddier. So the balanced pads also boost to the mid bass and the mids a bit more. So this is a very warm, muddy headphone, the DT1990 with balanced pads. So it actually introduces a lot of mud and warmth when you use the balanced pads, just to get that bass up. So it's kind of a, you know, a sacrifice. You're going to get more bass, but you're also going to get a lot more warmth and mud with the DT1990 balance pads. And now when we go into the treble, we can see, that 4K cut is not as bad on the balance pads. The 8K peak is still here, maybe a little bit reduced. So we still have the three spots, the 4.2K cut, the 9K cut, and the 8K peak. So these are problem spots. Let's say 9K. So 8, 9, 4K. These three problem spots are still there. They're still colored. They're still fatiguing. And then it's kind of a warm, muddled bass. It's not punchy. If you want punchy bass, you have to have more sub bass than mids and mid bass. And so you get punchier bass with the DT990s because it's thinner sounding in the mids and the mid bass, which makes the mid bass and sub bass more punchy over the mids. So far, you get a more transparent sound in the upper mids and treble with the 990s than both balanced ear pads and analytical ear pads, and you get an overall better, thinner, punchier sound with the 990s. Okay, so now we're going to introduce the DT1990 with some hyped third-party pads that a lot of people like to use, and that's the Dakoni Elite Velours. Okay, so now, a lot of people like to claim that the Dakoni Elite Velours on the DT1990 fixes a lot of the problems, improves it. We can see now both of them have very similar, bass and mids. The 1990s are still a little bit warmer and muddier in the mids than they should be. But we see we're getting really close here. So, a lot of people say get the Dakoni Elite Velour ear pads for the 1990s. And, it'll fix a lot of the problems that the official pads have. Now, we could see this huge 5.5K peak. This cut, it kind of peaks out here, kind of cuts down here. So the DT1990 with Dakoni Elite Velour have a very fatiguing 5.5K peak. The 8K peak is still a little bit there, and it kind of droops down in the upper treble. So if we were to trace over the green line, you would quickly feel that 5K peak, that 6K cut, that 8K peak, that cut. This region is very prominent. This 5 and 8K region, 5 to 8K, it's very prominent. And then it kind of droops down in the upper treble. So you get a lot of energy around 5 to 8K that's going to be shouting at you and fatiguing. We can flatten the target here and kind of get, a little bit more of that idea of, how these two sound. They sound really good all the way through. But in this region, you get a little bit more peaky, cutty coloration on the DT1990s. It's a little bit darker on the DT1990 with the Dakoni Elite Velours. So, this 5K peak alone ruins the headphone for me, to be honest, because again, this region you're really sensitive to, and having this peak and cut and peak really I find to be jarring. So these two spikes up here again, not the end of the world. You could add a little bit of toilet paper under the you could add a little bit of toilet paper under the pads right here. You could just put it in under it, like where my finger is. is, you just put it in there. It's not gonna focus. But yeah, you just put like 1 ply of toilet paper under here. Don't even cover the center of the driver. Just put it under the pad region right here, and that will dampen all of those high frequencies. That will dampen if like you want to complain about I think it sounds shimmery. I think it sounds musical. But if you wanted to dampen that, you could just put a little bit of foam or a little bit of toilet paper, like 1 ply, 1 little square of toilet paper would fix those high frequencies very quickly. So I hope this helps you guys understand that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get good sounding stuff. You can stick with the DT990s, save $500, save the extra however much for the third-party Deconi Elite pads. That 5.5K peak, honestly, would bother the crap out of me. Like I said, 5.5 and this 8K peak would bother me. You kind of want this nice treble bubble here. And the DT990s follow that treble bubble a bit better. The 1990s are kind of prominent here, and then they kind of scoop down and they kind of go like that. So you end up like with a lot of prominentity here, this hole in the upper treble, and then it goes back up, So this waviness really bothers me. And I would rather have the treble bubble of the red line that's, when we trace over it, it's kind of like a treble bubble, like how it's supposed to be. So yeah, and then of course we can just, for shits and giggles, we can add the SimGot EM6Ls, if you wanted some earbuds, and get rid of this, and you see, you got some wired earbuds, you got the wired earbuds, the SimGot EM6Ls, and you got some wired headphones, and I mean, what more could you ask for? Save your money. I'll see you guys later.